Victor Gyökeres to Arsenal. There has been huge steps forward in the last few days, and it is looking very likely that this transfer gets over the line. The debate, the question, is this the signing to finally deliver Arsenal that elusive Premier League title? We're going to get into it with pros and cons of the signing today. Let's kick things straight off with, of course, our resident Arsenal fan, Reese. Reese, we'll start on a positive note. Victor Gyökeres. How excited are you about this signing, and what can he bring to Arsenal?
Yeah, I am excited. As you know, I was in the Sesko camp. However, I know that there's an issue for Arsenal that need a striker for the here and now, not in 3 years' time. And I think Sesko's probably got a couple more years to do that. And I think it's you got to be the harshest of critics to think that Gyökeres doesn't excite you in some way. He is that player for now. There's a lot of Van Persie vibes about him that I like about him. His presence in the box, his ability to make his own space, his ability to deliver. It's an explosive forward. I think that's what we needed. An explosive forward. Not a silky striker who, you can cross it into him and he can tap it. This is a guy who explodes. That's the important thing for me here. You know, he's got everything you want in a modern day striker, in my opinion. 6'2", so his physical profile is perfect. He's a dominant force in the attacking play. On top of that, he's built very good as well. He's got the strength. In the Premier League, you need to be physical. His well-built frame is really going to help with that and help cause all sorts of problems for the defence. We know Arsenal are actually quite a good attacking side, despite their top scorer being Havertz last year. They're good at attacking, and he's perfect for to help give that extra edge. Arteta is one of the best at getting the best out of players. I think, despite me being his critic, he's very good at that. One of the best in the league, in my opinion. So he's probably not going to have to change too much tactically with Gyökeres. I'm looking forward to seeing how he's able, his ability to dominate the box, create his own space, and obviously cause chaos for these defenders, but also use him to the set piece advantage. That's something I will go on into a little bit later. But he's got all the tools to be successful. I mean, 97 goals in 102 games is insane. It's insane. But I'm more impressed, and I need to emphasize this point, is I'm more impressed by his figures in Europe last season. He managed to get 8 appearances. He got 6 goals. Now, we know there was a hat trick in there against Man City, but it's his goals against Lille, Sturm Graz, and RB Leipzig that are more important to me. And I'll tell you why. Because if you look at how many games Arsenal drew or lost last season, okay, I'll name some games out for you. 1-1 against Brighton at home, 1-1 against Fulham away, 0-0 at home to Everton, 1-1 at home to Brentford, and a 1-0 defeat to West Ham. Gyökeres scores them goals. That gets us 11 points overall from them games, which ultimately wins Arsenal the league. That's what he's being brought in for. That's what we struggled to do, and that's what we couldn't do. He's not here to score the second goal in a 2-0 win. What's the point in that? He's not there for that. He's there to be that guy. We can't break the team down. We're struggling. He scores the goal. Simple as that. Simple as that. We take the 1-0 win. We run. Look at all the great teams over the years that have had strikers that have done that for them. That's what's important. If you watch his game in the cup final against Benfica, Benfica were the better side. What happens? He wins the penalty. He wins the penalty. He scores the penalty with confidence. He's got the mentality there. And then to go on from that, you watch him just dominate the game. He created a lot of space for the second goal. I know that wasn't him that scored it, but the defence were worried about him. He then gets involved for the third goal. That's what we needed. That's what we've been lacking. And we need him to score those goals against the teams that are going to be hard to break down. And of course, you've got the bonus of him being a league winner. He's got a mentality about him. That's important to me. And where we've lacked the mentality, he should hopefully bring that. But they're my justifications for the pros. Jamie, am I talking absolute nonsense? Or is there something else about Gyökeres that deserves a mention?
Well, one thing just not on Gyökeres himself, but in terms of Arsenal, no Arsenal player scored more than 10 goals in the Premier League last season. It shows that you were lacking that overall top goal scorer. And if you saw it all last summer, the one thing fans said, and I think even including yourself, Reece, was we need a striker. That's what you needed. Because Havertz isn't an out and out 20 goal a season, kind of 30 goal a season striker. He's someone who will come up with some good goals, some important goals, but just not as consistency that you want from a top team where you're seeing the likes of Haaland, Isak, you've got others you can sort of name. They're the ones you want to be seeing scoring the goals. So I think Arsenal as a whole just needed this goal scorer. And this is where I think you're right, Reece, where you're saying Sesko probably needed a few more years, whereas Gyökeres is scoring the goals now. You know, he had, I saw in the league, 39 goals, which is very, very, very good. And I know you're going to, like, people can go, oh, it's the Portuguese league, it's not as good as the Premier League, but that doesn't matter. 39 goals means you can score goals. You'll score goals in nearly all the leagues. I'd say probably all the leagues. You will score goals, and I expect him to be in double figures. If he's not, that's where he's a flop.
Yeah.
But I don't see that happening because Arsenal are a top side.
This is my thing with him as well, is he doesn't need to come in and score 30 goals. Like those games I mentioned there, that's like how many games was that? 4 or 5 goals? Now I expect him to get more than that, and I agree it should be double figures. If the rest of the players continue their output as they are, that's a huge difference. There's no point in him scoring 40 goals and then the next top scorer is only on 5. There's no point, because it just means it's the same thing. He needs to be scoring those goals in those games. It's got to have a Haaland effect, to be honest. Haaland was that final piece in the jigsaw that took Man City to the treble. Now, Arsenal are miles away from a treble. Yeah, they need to even win a trophy. So he needs to be that final piece that fits. Like I said, it doesn't have to be 20 goals. It doesn't, even if it's 12 goals, if those 12 goals result in wins across all 12 games or not even losing, it's a significant impact. It's a significant impact. That's why it's being brought in.
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying. At the end of the day, it's to get you over the line, win you the league. But if we are sat here in a season's time and he's not got more than 10 goals, like 100% agree with Jamie, he will be able to flop, and rightly so, right? But to both your points, I said it a few weeks ago when we did this similar podcast. He is a goals machine. That is the bottom line. Whichever way you flip it, he puts the ball in the back of the net and he knows how to do it. Not that flashy, as you said. He's got a big presence, so he can win fouls, he can win penalties, etc. But the bottom line is the boy knows how to put the ball in the back of the net, and that is what you need. That is what many teams need. I said it for us as well. Like, big teams that want to win titles absolutely crave that. We've seen it for Man City. Haaland, brilliant example, and I think Haaland went too far, arguably, like in the sense that City became way too reliant on his goals when he's scoring 36 or whatever it was. So I agree. You probably actually don't want that with Gyökeres, weirdly. I mean, at the end of the day, if he does that and you win the league, everyone's going to be buzzing. But the point is, you don't want to become over-reliant on him. I don't really think that's going to happen. But as you said, I mean, the stats are a little bit different based on how you break it down. But at the end of the day, 67 goals and assists. Like, I don't care what league I don't care what league it's in. That is impressive. And we're not saying he's going to get those numbers in the Prem, but what we're saying is if he gets half of that, then he's had a phenomenal season and it might win Arsenal the league. So I think he's a great signing. But the obvious question is, it's the Prem, it's different. So, nothing's guaranteed in this world in football. Nothing is guaranteed. But he, for me, represents probably the best risk to reward ratio right now for someone who knows how to put the ball in the back of the net outside of the Prem, where you're paying 120 million for someone.
Yeah, I think also you got to look at, like, his age is 27. Now that's way too old, and that's probably a pensioner at Chelsea. But at most normal clubs, 27 means he's hitting his prime. He should be hitting his prime, probably a goal scorer, and that's exactly what Arsenal need. Arsenal are a team that they've come second for the past 3 years. They need something to get them over that line, and you can't do that by buying someone who's sort of 19 up and coming. In my opinion, I think you've got to go and buy someone who is the perfect goal scorer. Now, Haaland was a bit younger, but Haaland's a bit more of a, I don't know, like a prodigy. I can't say the word, but you know what I mean. Sort of like a superstar in that fact that he was a bit young. He's an anomaly. Most goal scorers will start doing their best work just in the sort of 26 to 29 sort of age range will be their peak. And that's where I think Gyökeres is at now, and that's why Arsenal should be going for him like they are.
No, I'd agree. And I think as well, like players tend to be playing a lot longer these days, particularly attackers. You've got Ronaldo who's 40, Messi's in his late 30s. We've got Harry Kane still banging goals in for Bayern Munich, and he's even 30, 31 now. And it doesn't look like he's showing signs of slowing down. And Gyökeres is probably of that level. If you get 5 years out of him consistently, it's money well spent. It doesn't mean that Arsenal shouldn't look for another striker at the same time. I know they've still got Gabriel Jesus. I know they've still got. I thought Martinelli did a very good job as a striker as well. But you can't just, it's a matter of they need someone else to come through at the same time. But for now, like we said, pound for pound, probably the best player on the market available as a striker. Realistically, other clubs don't need strikers as much as we do in comparison to that. Otherwise, he would have probably gone to Man City or Barca or Real. But he's probably the best available on the market at the price he's on. It's as
Yeah,
simple as that. And like we said, Arsenal need players for the now. And that's a mess they've created themselves. But they need a mess, they need that player now and a statement signing.
yeah, exactly that. And that will help. A guy who's got that output will massively help with the fan sentiment as well to go, we are investing the money in someone who's good to go, ready to go now. And to compare him, to make the good case for Arsenal to compare him to Sesko, Sesko maybe has a higher ceiling, but it's unrealised. It's all potential. It's a kind of signing that we're more likely to make, in my opinion, where he's young, get him for a good price, and he could be absolutely unreal, but we just don't know yet. And if you look at Sesko's output, relatively speaking, yes, it's a tougher league, etc., but Gyökeres is night and day above him stats wise.
And
So
it's
I think it's a great signing either way.
absolutely the numbers are there. Like, I know you can't be too fixated on data, as again, we'll discuss in a minute. But he delivered for what is technically the third side in Portugal. We could talk about Porto's implosion. We can talk about Benfica not being at the races. But there's been plenty of years where that's happened and Sporting have still not capitalised. He's won back-to-back league titles, including a double this season as well. He's delivered it, and he's got the mentality to deliver that. That's what's important. Watching him play, he is crucial to that team. Without him, obviously, without the goals, they're not winning anything. But that's the difference he's made to them, and that's the importance he brings.
Yeah. Well, let's look at some of the downsides. Again, we've said all the positives there, machine, everything, good value for money, potentially his peak. Let's talk about the downsides because with every transfer there comes risks, particularly outside of the Prem. So I guess the immediate question I have is, will it, and the obvious question, will that success convert to the Premier League? Because there is an absolute graveyard of players who have had phenomenal seasons in other leagues, come to the Prem, and absolutely had a disaster. So, is there anything? I guess that's a risk. But is there anything to say he will or won't be the same as all these other players in the past?
Well, he has to hit the ground running. You can't develop a player, let them take their time. He has to hit the ground running, which is problem number one. Um, yes, I understand that he's played at Coventry, so he's played at a physical level in the Championship, and he held his own exceptionally well, actually. However, we can then also say, what about João Felix and Darwin Núñez? When they made that step up from Portugal, they haven't delivered like what we thought they would. Granted, neither of these were playing at Stoke on a Tuesday night, but they still flopped for the big fee and for the traction it gained. That is a huge risk. Because this is a big step up for Gyökeres. I do ask myself, why hasn't he been signed already? Or if Arteta wanted him so bad, why wasn't he signed by now? That's not a criticism of anybody. That does put that question mark over it. Because a lot of Gyökeres' goals in the Portuguese league, the gap from Sporting, probably after Braga, is probably quite a low standard in terms of quality, right? There's a reason why only three teams in Portugal have dominated the league for so long. If Gyökeres is scoring these goals against these lower league sides, is he going to have that much luck in the Premier League? I'm not so sure. There's not as much space available to open to him. He's got to adapt. Arteta is good at helping these players adapt, but he's got to make sure that he adapts quickly because player defenders are going to go for him. He is in a physical environment. It's going to be tough, and it's going to be also a strain as well. And let's also not forget his defensive output isn't great. Arteta likes to press. He's not going to be one of them pressing. And for someone who is 6'2", he is pretty poor in the air. If we're a team that rely on set pieces, is he going to be much of a menace? Probably not. However, I think we've got players that can already cover that for him. So those are the factors that really need to be considered with this, in my opinion.
Yeah, the aerial ability was something I was going to bring up because that's been raised before. I think, if I'm not mistaken, around two of his last 40 goals have been headers, which is pretty low compared by all accounts. Particularly when you look at Arsenal, from set pieces, right? One of your biggest tools in your Arsenal has been corners, right? And I'm not, yes, we've got Gabriel Saliba, whatever, to cover that, but for someone that tall and that physical, you would probably expect to be better in the air. And Havertz, to his credit, I think is pretty good in the air. So if you're comparing him to Havertz, what you've currently got, that is a slight concern.
I
You
I
can
see
argue
this as
Havertz.
I see this as a positive. You two are saying it as a negative. I see it as a positive because Arsenal have already got that covered. Arsenal need something different. They don't need another header of the ball. They're already set piece FC with corners. They've got their attacking players for that. Gyökeres isn't getting rid of really the main attacking threats from these set pieces, and he's bringing something else. So I disagree that this is a negative. It might be negative on him personally on his own attributes, but for Arsenal, they don't need another great header of the ball. That's what they don't need because they've already got the
Yeah, but when
players.
they're in attack, though, obviously corners is different, and probably free kicks, depending on where they are, is different. But you've still got a part of the team's attack is still putting balls into the box, and Gabriel and Saliba aren't going to be there on a normal attack. So maybe outside of set pieces, I think it is a concern. But I agree. At the end of the day, it's going to go to Gabriel every time anyway. So
I
not
would
that relevant.
my sort of my sort of negative about him is look at all the goals you see in his reels. His reels are always he's got tons of space and he's running. He's either got the ball played in front of him or he's got the ball and he's got time to run at defenders. How much will Arsenal get that in next season? They'll get that in some of the big games because they don't let Arsenal, they don't sit back. But when they're playing, the likes of what Burnley will play next season, you'll see other teams do it. I just do it by to list them all out. They will sit back, and that's not what Gyökeres has been used to in the Portuguese league compared to what he will have. He will have 10 players behind the ball and go, good luck, get through that. There's no sprinting past that, making that sort of like counter-attacking kind of run. You will get that when you play Man City, when you play Liverpool, when you play Chelsea. There will be them gaps. But when you're playing the lower league teams, the teams that really sort of listed off saying, if he gets that first goal, perfect. They're the ones who will play the low block. So that's my only criticism, is the reels that I've seen of him is normally he's got tons of space to run into. He won't get as much of that in the Premier League week in, week out.
Yeah. And this was my point, is he's not going to get that space. So it's how Arteta tactically embeds him in to create that space. Were Arsenal creating much space when they didn't have the striker? Probably not. I think it's no shock that when Arsenal didn't play very well, they lost. That's made that perfectly clear. They were poor. They had to be at their very best to win their games. People might challenge that in some, but overall they did. Look at the game against Everton at home when they drew. Poor performance. You know, it's a Newcastle away. Poor performance. So if they're not, so he's going to have to create that space. Zubimendi will come in key here because he'll allow Odegaard and Rice to move forward. Will space be more created there, more creativity? I'm sure Arteta's thinking about that. And I would argue that Arteta will know how to get that to work for him. But you're right, he doesn't have that space. He's explosive, but if you can't get any momentum behind him, he's just going to be standing around like a brick wall. So and that's when his aerial ability comes into question because he can't even offer a threat from there. So he's a bit stuck. It's a tough one for him. Again, he's played for Coventry, and I do believe that league is physical. He didn't have a nice, you don't have an easy time in the Championship. But it's hard. It is hard because at 27, how much more can you train out of somebody?
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I've got one more point which might be a negative, and this one might be coming left field. You probably won't have expected it. I think this could be slightly negative impact on Saka. And the reason why I say that is Saka is meant to be Arsenal's star boy. And one thing, Gyökeres, you sort of said it, is his penalties ability is very, very good. Will he take them off Saka? Now, when I looked at Saka's stats, I ignored this season because he had a bit of injuries. But the season before that, he had 16 goals, 12 assists, 6 were penalties. Now, if I said to you, he scored 10 goals, 12 assists, you'd think that's just in the Premier League, by the way. You'd look a bit less down on it, and you wouldn't start comparing him to what Foden did that season, what Palmer did that season. The players that he's compared to, you wouldn't include him in that conversation if you take away his penalties. Now, Saka is a very, very good player. Doesn't mean he won't thrive. He might get more assists. But if his goals start going down, people might think he's actually dropping off. And I think for sort of, he's meant to be Arsenal's star player. Like you call him star boy, he's meant to be the star player. And if he's the one not getting the goals, that could negatively impact on him. Do you think I'm?
It's a
Do you understand where I'm coming from on this, or do
Yeah,
you think
no,
I'm
it
talking nonsense?
it is a good point because every footballer has an ego, right? Um, I would argue, if anything, it could have a more beneficial impact. I think it could ease the pressure on Saka as someone who was young, had to carry the team on his shoulders, knowing that he can be rested because you've got someone who can cover for him in those aspects is probably beneficial as well. Here's Saka, I'm sure, as long as the team win, I don't think he'll be too fussed. I think the tactical element is where it's important here. We're in a situation we're not looking up for the striker. Where can we pass the ball to him? Because we don't have one. Try not to rely too much on that mindset will be beneficial because Saka can still work his magic. If he misses his chance or mishits his kicks, Gyökeres is there to whack it in if he needs to. That's how I look at that instead of him having to do the hard work himself. But as long as they don't just go give the ball to Gyökeres and let's just hope for the best, that's not the right approach to take. That's what they shouldn't be doing because they should all still be contributing as a team. And I think that's where it could benefit Saka and ease the pressure on him and allow him to rest a lot more than he has been.
Yeah, I don't think that'll be an issue unless they start losing, and then question marks will be raised. But I don't personally think that's much of an issue. I just argue he'll get more assists because the chances creating, Gyökeres will be putting in the back of the net rather than Havertz. So I reckon it's probably going to help his assist stats, but might reduce his goal stats a little bit. Um, let's wrap up with our predictions on how, assuming this signing goes through, because of course it could still fall through. How many goals do we think he gets, and do we think he's going to be a success? I'll start. I'm going to go with a random number and say 16 goals. I think he will be good. I do still think there's that element of adapting to the Prem though. So I don't think he'll be an absolute sensation, which may be contrary to what I've kind of said about him previously. But I think 16 goals is probably whereabouts he'll end up.
Yeah, I was thinking similar numbers. I yeah, I'm gonna go if he doesn't break 15 goals, but it's sort of a tough one because I do generally think if he starts taking penalties, then I'm looking towards the 20 mark. And yeah, that's the sort of argument. So if Saka keeps the penalties, then I don't see him getting more than 15, but I think he will if he takes the penalties. And to be honest, I think his record's better than Saka's, so I would actually give it to him. But yeah, I think he'll do all right, but not outstanding.
Yeah, fair.
Um, I'm not phased by how many numbers he gets. He gets personally, I don't care if he gets five, as long as those five goals are in those games that I mentioned. That the goal that seals the win. I don't care how many he gets. He could get one, but if that's the 3 point difference, that's what he's been brought in for to do. On a realistic note, the minimum has to be 10. But if his overall play impacts the team in a positive fashion, then that's okay. If his overall impact on the team and the rest of the team score more goals because of it, I'm fine with that.
All right, there you have it. That is all we got time for this episode. As always, let us know your thoughts and predictions on how many goals Gyökeres would get at Arsenal in the comment section. But as always, like, comment, and subscribe. You know the drill.